All right. All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It being 6:02 p.m, I'll declare open the September Ordinary Council meeting of the Shire of Capel. We wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we are meeting on, the Wadani people. We wish to acknowledge and respect their continuing connection to the land, waters and community. We pay our respects to all members of the Aboriginal communities and their culture, and to elders past and present, their descendants who are with us today, and those who will follow in their footsteps. Record of attendance, we have 7 councillors in attendance tonight, and Councillor Andrew is absent. There are responses to previous public question taken on notice included in the minutes, so we now move along to public question time. I have a few questions on notice. The first from Kathleen Thomas of North Boynup.
Okay, Kathleen Thompson, 391 Brookdale Road, actually representing all the 8 residences who will be impacted by the Capel Road Extractive Industries licence if it's approved. I have 3 questions from the group. We have a very satisfactory arrangement with McColl's who run the milk tanker. Based on the road conditions and proximity of dwellings to the road, they've agreed to only travel at 40 k's an hour. They have said it's in their interest to preserve the driving surface and therefore reduce maintenance required on their vehicles. At the same time, it reduces the impact on local residents and makes it a safer driving environment for other road users. Generally, residents comment on the good conduct of their drivers. In an effort to promote a safe driving environment, preserve the fragile roadways and preserve some amenity for local residents, would Council extend the 40 km/h speed limit applied to haulage trucks on the Skippings Road section to Brookdale Road, where we all live, and some very close to the road, and Fowler Road, which in sections has a one-lane driving surface, goes underwater in winter, has a dangerous dogleg and an intersection where vision is obscured by vegetation.
Thank you, Ms Thompson, for your questions and for providing them on notice. The assessment of speed limits for haulage vehicles along individual roads is taken under using criteria that looks at the road width, geometry, traffic hazards, operating speed and traffic volumes. Haulage traffic in that development for Capel Road is recommended to be restricted to 60 km an hour along Brookdale Road and Fowler Road, where the road width is in excess of 6 metres. This is not the case on Skippings Road, which has a road width of less than 5 metres in sections, which limits safe passing opportunities. Because of this, a condition of 40 km an hour for the haulage vehicles has been recommended. These speed limits are a condition on the current extractive industry licence and only applicable to the trucks associated with this activity. The Shire has no authority to impose broader speed limits on local roads and on traffic on those local roads, as is the domain of the State Government's Road Traffic Act.
Can I just ask then, could the 40 km/h be applied to Fowler Road, where it is actually very narrow and the dogleg is a one-lane section? Because I would, if that's the reason for doing it on the Skippings Road section, surely that applies to Fowler Road as well.
Council has the option to amend the conditions to include Fowler Road, should it wish. But as I said, there is a geometry around it, so it has legitimate planning reasons for it, so that Council can make a decision in it from a defendable position.
Right. Yeah, I'd like councillors to consider that. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. President. Number 2, could you please explain how the limit of 12 truck movements per day, with a clause saying, depending on demand, works? Does this mean there is really no limit? Or who would decide what the actual limit is? and what changes are allowable, and will residents be notified in advance of any of those changes?
Sure. The applicant is recommended to be restricted to 12 truck movements per day, so that'd be 6 in, 6 out. Should the applicant require an uplift in sand exportation to meet the needs of a specific contract, the applicant has the ability to apply to the Shire to seek a temporary increase in truck movements on the basis that the Shire has provided a traffic impact statement and management plan. The Shire would be under no obligation to agree to this arrangement. However, the Shire may request that neighbours are notified as part of a potential temporary increase in numbers. This temporary approval is usually delegated to the Chief Executive Officer.
Thank you. And number 3, what are the complaints protocols, and can you explain clearly how they work?
The operator would be subject to the Shire's standard practices for compliance of any imposed licence conditions. Any complaints received regarding a breach of planning condition or planning approval would be investigated by Shire officers upon receipt of evidence. Should the Shire officers have sufficient evidence to suggest that a breach has occurred, an investigation would be conducted into that activity and either request that the operation aligns to the approval or continue towards an infringement process.
Okay, so just to clarify, if, say, I was unhappy about some behaviour I saw on the road from one of these haulage trucks, if they're allowed to get on these roads,
Yep.
Who would I ring?
So
Or how?
depending on what behaviour this operator was undertaking on the road, if they were exceeding a condition, say the 60
Yep.
k an hour condition was approved, if they were exceeding that and you had evidence to prove that, you could report that to the Shire as a breach of licence condition, and it would go through the complaints handling process. You can report that either by phoning the Shire on 9727 0222 or by emailing the records team at info@capel. If it's other traffic behaviour on the road, such as dangerous driving and exceeding the state speed limit of 110 kilometres an hour, that would be a WA police matter.
Right, okay. So in the application, it actually says that we should ring the applicant.
Yep.
But we can also, just to be clear, instead of ringing the applicant, we can actually ring the Shire.
Yes.
Yep.
You can ring the Shire, but the applicant, does have their own complaints handling process. Most extractive industry licence operators do, as they try to deal with the community first and hopefully come to a mutual understanding and agreement. If there has been a variation from condition, or if there's just something that's going on that might meet conditions, but a neighbour or community member might not necessarily be either aware of or happy with.
Yeah. And so would this also be, because in his last licence, he didn't put any of the conditioner on the road to stop the dust. That was never done. Okay. So those kind of things we could actually complain to the Shire about if those conditions are not met.
If it's a condition of the licence to undertake road dust mitigation activities, in the instance of this proposal it is, if that was not being complied with, you can complain to the Shire. Yes.
Great. Thank you very much. And just before I leave, I'd just like to thank the councillors who took the time to come out to the roads and have a look around, and also the guys who were happy to return my calls. I would also hopefully thank everyone because they looked at the photos of the real conditions of these roads that I sent out a couple of days ago, early in the week. The road is fantastic at the moment, and I thank the Shire for all their efforts, but we really need those conditions to be there for the whole year, not just for a few weeks after the grader and the roller. But thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Ms Thompson. Sandra Alderson of Peppermint Grove Beach. All right. Those questions were received in notice. I'm happy to read out. Question 1. I've been informed that the Shire of Capel has no policy regarding short stay accommodation. If this is the case, how is the Shire able to grant approval to Airbnb requests? And question 2, why does the Shire of Capel adopt the City of Bustleton's holiday homes regulatory framework? If it is because the Shire doesn't have a budget for short stay accommodation officer, then why can't this be funded by charging these short stay accommodation businesses an additional tax or rate? Based on a basic internet search, there are 34 properties listed on Airbnb in the Peppermint Grove Beach locality. This is estimated to be 10% of all dwellings. Charging these holiday homes businesses an annual fee would help to fund the Shire employee to help police holiday homes in the locality. I'll defer those questions to the Chief Executive Officer.
Thank you, Shire President. So currently, short stay rental accommodation is managed through the Shire's annual home business registration process. The Shire's previously been waiting for guidance from the state government with a state planning policy, which would provide uniformity across the state for the assessment of short-term accommodation uses. As the state planning policy takes precedent over a local planning policy, many local governments within the state have held off introducing the local planning framework in the circumstances that work may merely be superseded once the state formalised their position on this matter. However, the state has not proceeded at the rate in which would be considered expedient by multiple local governments, hence why the Shire has decided to commence drafting an interim policy. The Shire is in the process of formulating a local planning policy to provide further guidance and framework for the discretionary land use of short-term accommodation. This would outline additional provisions to the Shire's local planning scheme number 8 and would provide the necessary guidance between now and when the state introduces a state planning policy. We anticipate that the draft local planning policy in relation to short-term rental accommodation will be advertised for public comment in the next few months.
Mr. Brian Hearn, Peppermint Grove Beach.
Thanks, Mr. President. My question relates to the Shire of Capel Place Plan 2023 to 2027, and I thank the CEO for letting me know that the item has been withdrawn, but I would like to put some questions on the public record for when it is considered by Council. So just a bit of a brief preamble. I've spent nearly 2 days on and off reading the Shire of Capel Place Plan 2023-27. In my opinion, the document contains inaccuracies, inconsistencies, spelling mistakes including Indigenous spelling, omissions that have been raised by ratepayers on numerous occasions, and some language that is hard to accept as a rational description of the Shire's various locations. The plan was to activate people. However, the Shire only attracted 0.3 of 1% of the population to workshops, and only 3% of the population lodged submissions. Do the other 97% have any knowledge of the plan? Clearly, something is not working with our communications, and I want to work with the Shire to activate people, to enable ratepayers to have ownership of this plan. I'm also concerned at what appears to be the use of Wikipedia in the document, and possibly AI, I said possibly AI, artificial intelligence. If so, this may explain some of the flowery language used, and if these platforms have been used, it should at the very least be acknowledged in the document. My 2 questions are, the Shire's long-term financial plan identifies capital expenditure of some $153 million. Can the projects identified in the plan be included in the place plan under the various location headings to better inform ratepayers and to enable them to focus on what the place plan is all about? It's about place planning, development and investment, and to enable them to have a more meaningful input if in fact more input is going to be sought from the community. The second question is, I note in item 13.1 the text refers to a draft report while the actual report is labelled final, and I acknowledge it's been withdrawn. Can I request that when this comes back to Council, that Council gives serious consideration to again seeking ratepayers' comments on the draft place plan with the inclusion of the capital expenditure in the document before adopting a final plan, and to seek that comment in a targeted, well advertised manner. Perhaps the target groups could include community groups, volunteer groups, sporting clubs, community associations, as well as ratepayers at large. So they're the two questions, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr Hearn. The Chief Executive Officer.
Thank you, Shire President, and thank you, Mr Hearn, for your questions and providing them in advance. I guess I can probably start by saying that the difficulty in engaging the community with these strategic processes is incredibly frustrating for us as well, because a significant amount of effort goes into organising the workshops and providing the opportunity for the community to comment. And that's part of the reason why, when we did the place plan, it was so important to get information from the whole community. We actually sent the survey out to all 7,500 residents in the district. I guess the response rate was normal, which is also disappointing. Often it is very difficult to get the community to engage, and that's, as I said, that's why we actually sent the survey to every single resident in the district as a means of doing that. To answer your question more directly, the place plan is a high-level document that captures the essence of a community, what is special and unique, what is to be preserved and celebrated. The next step beyond the place plan will be to give effect to it through place development and place management. Subject to Council adopting the long-term financial plan tonight, the place plan, when it ultimately comes back to Council, will be used to guide the implementation of the identified projects within the long-term financial plan and be integrated with place development and place management plans. This will allow the Shire to implement projects identified in the long-term financial plan, but execute them in a way that enhances the character of the district and each town site or locality in that process. In relation to the place plan, the item has been withdrawn, as you've already been informed, to review some of the inconsistencies in the draft. Once the draft has been reviewed and updated and provided back to the Shire, a decision will be made regarding how and when the item comes back to Council.
So will you consider including the capital expenditure that's identified in the long-term financial plan to better inform ratepayers when and if you do go back to the Shire? Because, I mean, I could mention 100 things, right? But if people know that in the next 10 years you're going to do X, Y and Z, and you have a meeting and discuss it with them and they can't actually see it in the plan, you're going to waste a lot of time.
Yep.
Let them focus on what they need to focus on, not ask stupid questions about decisions that have already been made.
The Chief Executive Officer.
I guess probably to be really... so once the long-term financial plan is adopted, our intention then is to implement those projects from the long-term financial plan using the information from the place plan. Okay, so it's not so much a matter of incorporating the long-term financial plan into the place plan. We actually use the place plan to do the projects. Right. So it kind of happens. I think we both understand, but it kind of happens in reverse. Council identifies the projects that they want to complete in the long-term financial plan, and then we use the place plan to make sure that we enhance the character of each of the areas when we do the projects.
I'll comment, I'll sit down, but I've seen a lot of plans in the last couple of days, and most of the ones I've seen include it. So it's disappointing that we can't. So thank you.
I think you'll see that the information will come together.
Thank you, Mr Hearn. That concludes the public questions I have on notice. Are there any public questions from the floor? No. Move on to applications of leave of absence. Is there any applications? No. Declarations of interest. I don't believe any have been received. Notice for items discussion behind closed doors. There is one item this evening, 20.1, the Chief Executive Officer Annual 2022-23 Performance and Remuneration Review and 2023-24 Performance Agreement. We now move to confirmation of the minutes of the 30th of August ordinary meeting. Is there a mover for those minutes? Councillor Tarantroy. Is there a seconder? Councillor McCleary. Councillor Tarantroy, anything on those minutes? Seconder? Is there any discussion on those minutes? No. I'll put those to the vote. Those in favour? And those minutes are carried unanimous. Announcements by the presiding member. First thing is item 13.1, the Shire of Capel Place Plan 2023 to 2027 has been withdrawn from this evening's agenda. Next, I just want to say congratulations to Glenys Malatesta on taking out the Murray Lang Bushfire Service Award at the recent WA Fire and Emergency Service Awards in Perth. Glenys has been recognised for her outstanding contribution not only to the Shire of Capel and Jalaurette Bushfire Brigade, but to numerous deployments across the state to assist in emergency responses and recovery. Glenys is an inspiration for volunteering, and the Shire congratulates her on this well-deserved award. And secondly, tonight is the last meeting of the 2021-2023 Council of the Shire of Capel. The next meeting of the Council will be held post-elections, where the makeup could potentially be a little different. As President, I am proud of the accomplishments over the past 2 years, which have made a real impact, and we're excited for what the future holds. I want to thank the councillors for their contributions these last 2 years. In particular, Councillors Sciano, Mogg, Andrew and Mogg are coming to the end of their 4-year term. On behalf of the Shire, thank you for your contributions over that 4-year period. We've had some challenges over the course of that term, such as our Parks and Gardens in Dalyellup, but we've also had some great wins, such as the gazettal of the local planning scheme number 8. There is a lot to look forward to in our forward planning, and come what may in October, I think we all look forward to seeing it delivered. Sorry? Did I say Mogg twice? Oh, sorry, apologies for that. Councillors Sciano, Mogg, Andrew and Noonan are coming to the end of their 4-year term. All right. There are no petitions, deputations or presentations. We now move to item 11, motions of which previous notice has been given. 11.1, a notice of motion from Councillor Tarantroy regarding the green patch. Is that moved by Councillor Tarantroy? Is there a seconder to that motion? Councillor Mogg. Councillor Tarantroy.
Thank you. So the motion is that Council, in the interest of public health and safety, peace of mind of community members and decision-making transparency regarding any future development of the area known as the Green Patch, requests that the Chief Executive Officer within 4 weeks to take steps to 1. Make broadly accessible through the Shire's media information sources the various versions of the Green Patch structure plan as they become publicly available. 2. Begin the preparation of a report to Council subject to an endorsement. Commences an application to amend the Greater Bunbury Regional Scheme to amend SCA 4 Wastewater Treatment Plant Odour Buffer Area for the Dalyellup Wastewater Treatment Plant based on up-to-date and independent odour modelling. Number 3, make a request under Section 94 of the Freedom of Information Act 1992 to the West Australian Planning Commission, Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage, the Environmental Protection Authority, the Housing Authority and Water Corporation for the release of all information pertaining to lots 5262 R37116, 29111 and 9076 Maidment Parade, Dalyellup. Greater Bunbury Regional Scheme Amendment 0020/57 and the proposed Dalyellup Green Patch Local Structure Plan. Number 4, formally request that the WA Planning Commission defer any decision on the Dalyellup Green Patch Local Structure Plan until independent odour modelling has been completed. The reasons for this is I've been contacted by several people who are very concerned about this, and I believe that future residents for the proposed Green Patch Satterley residential housing development are entitled to full disclosure and transparency from Satterley and all government departments with legislative responsibilities and with the power to inform and insist on up-to-date odour buffer studies and potential contamination surveys by independent scientific bodies of the Green Patch. Past industries, businesses who operated in the Green Patch prior to current rigorous public health and safety protocols should, for ethical reasons, disclose past practices and that do not meet current protocols. Regulation for the health and well-being of current and future residents. Full disclosure of past uses of the land on which Satterley proposed to sell housing lots needs to be available so land purchasers can make an informed decision to buy land and to build a family home in the area known as the Green Patch. Everyday people, like you and me, deserve to be treated respectfully. Therefore, all studies, scientific data and potentially contaminated site information should be available to them. There's an officer comment that mentions a cost between $50,000 and $60,000 for the odour modelling, but I think that that's a small amount when you're considering the health and safety of families. Thank you.
Councillor Mogg.
Thank you, President. I'd just like to applaud Councillor Troy for bringing this motion to Council and for giving the residents the support on this topic that needs sorting out, and fully endorse your support. Thank you.
Is there anyone to speak against the motion? Speakers for? Any discussion? Councillor McCleary?
I'd like to move an amendment to the motion.
Your amendment, Councillor?
To delete.
Microphone, yeah, sorry.
Got to turn the mic on. Yeah, look, I'd like to move an amendment. Just hang on, let's get it all marked up. So delete points 2 and 4. That's it.
That's it? All right, is that your amendment on the board there, Councillor?
Yep.
Is there a seconder to that amendment? Councillor Noonan. Councillor McCleary.
Thank you for seconding that, Councillor Noonan. My reasons for deleting these two items is the odour model is owned by the Water Corporation, along with the risks of any odour escaping from the plant, and they'd have to deal with it going forward. If we take on board a independent study of our own and spend money towards that, then it's one consultant arguing with another consultant over the outcomes of modelling. And part of the odour modelling depends on the information provided by the Water Corporation and other statistical information. It's also based on prevailing winds, and for odour to go from the plant into the area would be a northwesterly wind that would create that issue. Apart from that, the rest of the motion's quite good. We need that information, seeking that, you know, make it publicly available so people are aware. In the long term, odour modelling and odour management of a treatment plant can be done within the processes within the treatment plant by capping certain parts of the plant. I have to declare that up until the 14th of September I was working for the Water Corporation, so I'm aware of these situations. I think some of the requests going back to the Water Corporation, if there is an odour issue there, we could, through the Department of Environment, enforce some issues about managing that odour. So I don't think it's something that would stop the development in that sense, but I do believe there's other matters that might be unveiled by seeking the additional information and making it public to the general people of our ratepayers. I would be concerned about spending $50,000 to $60,000 on a report that might not get us anywhere, and the Water Corporation need to own that risk, and us doing anything towards that would probably bear some things back to us and a consultant going against another consultant. I just don't think it's going to work.
Just before I call the second, can I just remind councillors just to speak clearly into their microphone? I'll sort of struggling to hear you a bit then, sorry, councillor. Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to thank Councillor Terrantroy for the motion and Councillor McCleary for the amendment, proposed amendment. I agree with this amendment in that it does present the problem where you've got one group of consultants arguing against another. The value of having the buffer, as it currently stands on the southern side, it's around about 150, I think, metres wide, 200 metres wide or so. It provides a visual barrier, but which is appreciated by the residents who live closest to the green patch on the south side. If that was to be extended around, that would also cover the area which is known as the Western Turning Circle, where there are some other concerns which have been raised, like the presence of heavy metals, asbestos, various different other problems which have been identified in some of these previous studies that have been mentioned or that are being called for in Councillor Terrantroy's report. The bottom line is that each of those reports, and there have been several over the last 15, 20 years, the bottom line is that each of them say that more investigation needs to be done before a decision is made on whether this is a suitable place for a new subdivision. So while I applaud the idea of covering that, particularly that Western Turning Circle, which has where contaminants have been identified, I think that this is a problem that the developer or the proponent has to sort out, and that the state government has to sort out. I don't think this is a problem that we need to get involved with at this stage. But I certainly fully support the notion that all residents, existing residents and future potential residents, should be fully informed about what has happened in that area in the past. Thank you.
Are there any speakers for or against the amendment? No. Councillor Mogg?
A question through the chair.
Yep.
With Water Corporation, their documents, their findings, that's freedom of information, and Shire can access with reports.
I wouldn't be aware of the document publish procedures of Water Corp.
Were there consultation?
Is that... Yeah. You got that? The Chief Executive Officer.
Through you, Shire President, certainly anyone, including the Shire or any community member, can use the Freedom of Information Act to apply to get a copy and see that information. There are protocols within the Freedom of Information legislation that talks about information that may be redacted, and ultimately that's state government has a Freedom of Information office in every agency.
So I don't think that was your question, was it?
Just
You were just talking about general publishing of these reports, weren't you?
yes. So
Yeah.
as councillor,
FOIs.
You're just talking about just regular access to these documents.
yes.
Yeah,
So
without
if
going
we-
through FOI procedures. Yeah. Yeah.
Can I
So-
just bit of clarification on that? Just backing up from what Councillor McCleary said, that having two consultation processes. So if we don't do ours and Water Corp do theirs, and their findings, their reports, the Shire staff and people are able to access that information.
Yeah, only if that report is released publicly, which I wouldn't know if that would be, because I don't know the reporting framework Water Corp has, but it's probably something you'd definitely be able to apply for it under FOI, depending on, as mentioned by the CEO, certain redaction categories that it might fall under. But in terms of whether Water Corp publish these on a website for all to see, I'm not actually sure. Yeah, it's probably.
Thank you.
Yeah. Were there any speakers for or against that amendment? No. Does the mover wish to close?
Thank you, Mr. President. Look, I think item 1 and item 3 cover the thing about, well, item 3 covers the freedom of information thing to the Water Corporation, so we've got that covered in this motion. As I say, I don't think it's good money spent doing something that's already been done, and hopefully we can extract that information from the various departments.
Put that amendment to the vote. Those in favour? And those against? That amendment's carried 5-2. That becomes the substantive motion. Were there any speakers for or against the item? No. Does the mover wish to close? No. Put that item to the vote. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimous. Questions of which previous notice has been given? There is none, so we now move to Chief Executive Officer reports. 13.1, Shire of Capel Place Plan 2023-2027 has been withdrawn from this evening's agenda. So we now move to 13.2, the Plan for the Future 2023 to 2033, review and update of the Strategic Community Plan and integration with the Corporate Business Plan. Is there a mover for that item? Oh, apologies. And just please note there is an updated officer's recommendation to include a point 8 that reads, notes that some terminology may be amended to align with the Shire of Capel's place plan following adoption. Is there a mover for that recommendation? Councillor Terrantroy. Is there a seconder? Councillor Mogg. Councillor Terrantroy.
Moved as read.
Councillor Mogg. Is there any discussion on that plan? For or against? Councillor McCleary.
I was going to steal a bit of a quote from Dom Thorborn from our meeting, and the comments that he makes is the future is not a place we are going, it is a place we are creating. The roads there are not to be travelled, they are to be made. And this is part of the action towards that. So I fully endorse the motion.
Are there any other speakers to that item? The Deputy President.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to briefly recognise, I think, the strategy that's been applied here in bringing together the SCP and the CBP into a plan for the future. I think it, really goes to show that when you're in this environment, it may be somewhat a little easier to see how those two plans work together, but from a community perspective in how we present these strategic plans, combining that into a plan for the future, I think it's a little thing, but I think it makes a big difference. And I think we're getting ahead of the curve on that front as well, in regards to what legislation will require us to do in the future as well with our forming documents. So, great work from the administration on pulling that together.
Are there any other speakers to that item? Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd also like to acknowledge all the work that the staff have put together in putting the plan, putting this all together, all of the plans, the Strategic Community Plan and the Corporate Business Plan. I think we are much better informed as councillors when, over the 4-year period that I've been here. And I think that it's important that the public is also given an idea of the background and the extent and the vision that these plans have, and the fact that they are integrated and they work together. And so I'll just read point 7 of this motion because I think it's worth noting that Council notes that the final published version for the plan for the future, incorporating the Strategic Corporate Plan 2023 to 2033 and the Corporate Business Plan 2023 to 2027 strategic initiatives, will be graphically designed, formatted and illustrated to a standard suitable for public presentation. So that we've been on the journey, the staff have been on the journey, so we've I think got a fairly high degree of confidence in these plans, and I think it's important that the public also gets to see and understand where the plans have come from, how much work has gone into it, and the fact that it does actually represent the communication that the public has been giving us, and that we're communicating that back to the public, because I know that is a concern for some. So I fully endorse the motion.
Are there any other speakers to that item? Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, just to basically reaffirm what Councillor Noonan was just saying, technically the Strategic Community Plan and the Corporate Business Plan are legislatively individual documents, but I think it makes a lot of sense, and we've extensively workshopped this with staff to, you almost, I think the phrase we were using was, I mean, they're as close as they can be without completely dovetailing them, and really it's like Jack and Jill walking down the path holding hands, but the way this has been presented, the plan for the future is, I think, fantastic, and once again, kudos to staff and all concerned.
Are there any other speakers to that item? No, I'll just say a few words myself. Yeah, I think it's great to see this plan come in. I think we're certainly ahead of the curve. It's something we're going to see come through from the state regarding council plans, as they're calling them. We've gone for a bit of a better title of Plan for the Future. Certainly think it's great, some of the updates that are in this plan. Our Strategic Community Plan and Corporate Business Plan were due for their refresh before they go back out in another 2 years' time for the full rebuild. But I'd just like to note that we, as part of endorsing this, it would be updating the Shire of Capel's vision. Our vision, which currently reads, a future-focused, resilient community that benefits from good governance, responsive services and appropriate facilities to deliver positive social, environmental and economic outcomes for everyone. While that is a good vision, it's more of a mission statement. So the vision that's proposed for us tonight, a lifestyle of choice, connecting community, culture and country, is much more sharp and certainly is a vision for the future, and something that I think we can build off, and we'll see how this document going forward will tie very closely into the place plan, how we'll see it build through the place development and place management strategies as they come over and come online, and we'll really start to see the umbrella form of our strategic planning framework. So I commend the plan to the council, and hopefully we'll see some good work come out of it very soon. All right, if there's no other speakers, I'll return to the mover to close.
So yes, I agree with everything my fellow councillors have said. It's great that these, as Councillor Dillon aptly put, that we've got these documents that dovetail together, because it gives a better picture of where we're going in the future. And as with any strategic planning, it's open for review and additions to be added. So we need this to go forward because it is about developing the place plan, but we've put that on the hold because we've got to do some work on that, but it will fit back in with this. So I think it's great, and I thank all the staff for all their hard work and all the workshops, and yeah, it's been huge. Thank you.
I'll put that on to the vote. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimous. 13.3, Cardigan Biodiversity Park Feasibility Study. Is there a mover for that recommendation? Councillor Mogg. Is there a seconder? Councillor Dillon. Councillor Mogg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I read the motion as read and thank you for the officer's recommendation and ask for council support for this project. Thank you.
Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, this is, as the motion is titled, a feasibility study. So basically, it's gone out to basically a consultant who's given us some ideas about moving forward and ideas about how to maybe utilise the site, which was a formerly mined Lucas site, which has been restored to a very high quality, and it could be a real asset to the Shire. Some of the plans are a bit pie in the sky for my liking, but I think it's definitely worthy of progressing and accepting the feasibility study as it stands. If we are as a Shire to maybe move forward with any sort of development to make it, something else, I think we need to start at a very modest level and progress with some caution, because some of the initial plans that the feasibility study put forward were quite grandiose, if I may say so. So I'm happy to support the study as presented, but I would certainly just register that I would be only proceeding down the Cartagena Park if it was fairly modest in its initial scope, but happy to recommend it as it currently stands.
Are there any speakers against that item? Speakers for? Councillor Terentroy.
Yeah, so this feasibility study, it was the first stages of this, and it is a long plan. Basically, we need huge investment from someone to make this a happening thing. I'm sure that there are people out there that see the benefit of the development, but it is just that it's like a long-term plan. And yeah, some of the ideas are very all-encompassing and maybe a little grandiose. However, I think when you're aiming for something like this, you need to look at the whole picture and you can't discard any ideas. So yes, you've got to listen to everyone, get a feel for what everyone wants, what's possible, how long that's going to take, the committed volunteer workforce that is wanting to do this. And also, basically, we need the funding. So we need to attract some entrepreneur. So if you know anyone out there that is interested in nature and making a really great place for people to come for tourism, to gather, to learn about country, and preserve that area for future generations, let them know we're interested. Thank you.
Are there any speakers for or against? Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. My first one's a question on point 3, and I should have brought it up to the meeting before. Just the last line, it says vision from a concept from feasibility. Should that be reworded?
Yeah, it should be from a concept and feasibility. So would you like to amend that from to an and? All right, so just amendment to point 3, from to an and, between concept and feasibility. All right, that amendment's on the board. Is there a seconder to that amendment? Councillor Terentroy. Mover wish to discuss the amendment? Seconder wish to discuss the amendment? Is there any discussion on that amendment? Does the mover wish to close?
As long as I get to make a comment on the whole thing.
Yeah, you will, yeah.
If I could do that now. If it,
Well, it's only relevant to the... if
right,
it's relevant to the amendment.
Move the amendment, then
Yep.
I'll deal with it in the next place.
All right, I'll put that amendment to the vote. Those in favour? That amendment's carried and becomes part of the substantive. Councillor McCleary, you have the call.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's a really good report. I don't know if the audience know where this park is. It's along the Bustle Highway and the old Bustle Highway or Forest Road route along there. It's a
Good, Ruff.
parcel of land that sits within the Chewits.
Order.
It's trying to give it a life after the mine site's finished. And part of the study, and I encourage people to read it to get an understanding of what the whole thing means. We haven't committed big dollars to this yet, and as my fellow councillor Dylan pointed out, that we've got a little bit way to go, and that's the next phase that we're heading into, and I think it's got legs to head into that area. The feasibility study does identify a number of risks that will be investigated further and reported on in the next stage. That in that next stage, I'm hoping that it'll be more tabulated in the risk movements there, so it gives it as an appended thing, like a proper project presentation as it goes into that. There's land tenure issues, there's operating costs going forward, and these are all identified in this plan, so we're aware of them. It's hopefully that there'll be some benevolent investment or grants that come to it before it goes anywhere. We don't want to put a big burden on the Shire ratepayers with this, but I can see it's got some good ideas in there that would add to a lot of interest as a park, and hopefully we can get some, if not all of them, done going forward.
Are there any other speakers to this item? Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to the councillors who have spoken already. I'd like to acknowledge the work that's been done by Aluka in rehabilitating the site over many years. It's an example of a good rehabilitation. They've spent a lot of time, a lot of money there, and the fact that this is now being looked at as a biodiversity park is a credit to them. So kudos for their being a good corporate citizen. I'd also like to acknowledge the work being done by Fauna at the Possum Finishing School, which is part of that site, and you know the plans that Fauna has to go beyond rehabilitating possums, injured possums, to other fauna. You know, they do tremendous work, and a lot of people put in a lot of volunteer hours out there, so I think what they have done is commendable, and it does represent a tremendous opportunity for the Shire going forward in terms of the tourism potential that the site has. So it's I think a very, very commendable motion. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers to that item? Councillor Tarantroy. You've already spoken,
This is the
Councillor?
amendment.
Sorry?
Yeah.
The amendment's been...
back to
yeah,
the
we're back on the
substantive.
substantive, Councillor.
Yep.
Are there any other speakers to that item? The Deputy President.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm very supportive of the concept and the idea around this park. I guess I'm very eager for these plans to get underway, to the sense that these are the sort of funds that we need to attract from state government, federal government, and from other funding sources. You know, the plan actually looks at a couple of different options. One of them is about $120 million of the high specification build. Simply not achievable in my lifetime without 99 to 99.5% of government funding. I mean, the forecasted cash flow that the feasibility study talks about, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars in loss per year. Now, I'm not saying that that's necessarily around the being managed by local government and obviously by Fauna as well. But you know, this plan has been based off the concept that commencement is starting in 2024, and $100 million is being spent by 2025, and then following on from that, there is actually quite a detailed plan of study in here around the actual cost of maintaining and continuing that facility. And it is negative. It is in the negative. And if we're not managing that site and losing those funds, then some other organisation will be having to manage that site, and they'll need to ultimately attract that funding from somewhere else. So I'm going to support the motion because there is no harm in continuing the work in advocating for a project like this, and it's a great project to advocate for. And I really hope that we do the work and get the government support needed to do this. But this will be a very serious discussion before we sign a cheque to assist with this, because this feasibility study does not say that this precinct will be making money. I think by 2051, it's expected net cash flow to be negative 38,000. In 2041, a negative cash flow of 211,000. And that's considering commencement in a short term, which is, I think, from the discussion tonight, is clearly not the intentions of what's going to happen here. So feasibility and the outcome of a feasibility study, will it have economic benefit that is not calculated within that net cash flow case? Of course it will. Does the being in the negative in the cash flow forecast being in the negative mean it's not feasible? Well, no, it doesn't, because there's a lot of measurements and other things that you have to measure through the multiplier effect that it has throughout the community. But I'm definitely perhaps a little more sceptical about the feasibility of this project decades into the future. I think there's some really fantastic ideas in there, and then I think component to that as well is the concept of focusing on the bare bones that fauna do need, and the figure that comes along with that of about 8-point-something million is a much more achievable thing to do in the short term. And of course, supporting a group like Fauna and what they're doing is, I think, a priority of the project as a whole. But I hope that it doesn't become such a big thing that we stumble and we don't get anywhere.
All right, everyone's spoken but myself, so I suppose I'll have a crack. Look, I think the comments made around the table tonight are very, very interesting and very true, and I think what the Deputy President's just spoken about then certainly a consideration we need to look at going forward. I mean, those figures, that's the Rolls Royce in the plan. That's build it all now and then wait for it to take off after. And yeah, it's certainly a number which is just astronomical in terms of anything that the Shire could achieve, even with government support or private investment. So, you know, there's talk about staging and cutting things down and scaling back in the plan, which I certainly think is something to look at. There's aspects of the park which I think are just fantastic. A place to camp and you know, Indigenous culture awareness areas, and the possum finishing school, which Fauna have already got there, which they can build upon. It's a fantastic facility. I've been there a few times and see what they do. It's certainly great. And they're also talking about a bit of an animal hospital for native wildlife, which there isn't one in Western Australia. So it's certainly something that I think we're going to see more of a need for as our urban areas grow into our more rural areas. So, you know, and you look at the project from afar, and you look at the vision which we've just adopted. You know, it's about connecting, it's about community, it's about culture, and it's certainly about the country of which we operate in. And you know, the biggest thing in the Shire of Capel is that lifestyle of choice. You know, we don't have a jetty, we don't have tower in the city, we don't have all that sort of stuff. What we've got is natural assets. We've got 27 kilometres of the best beach in Western Australia. No matter what anyone thinks, I think we do. You know, we've got Ironstone Gully, we've got the last remaining parts of the Tulip Forest. You know, we've got some absolutely fantastic assets. The Boyne Upstate Forest, and you know, I'm looking out the crowd, I can see a few people that have got certain involvement in that. You know, the Stirling Block with the fenced off area and the wild orchids and flowers that grow in there. Absolutely fantastic. They're the assets that we need to preserve, and this is what this is targeted towards, that natural nature offering, which more and more people are desiring, but it really isn't offered in this part of the southwest. So you start looking at how that all fits together with, you know, potential, the bike path going along all the coast, the Tulip Forest and all the work they're doing out there to preserve those facilities. Link that in with this carriaging up, you float, you go through up Goodwood Road to Ironstone, back around the Boyne Upstate Forest. It all just starts to create a picture of that natural offering that we do have. So, you know, I think it's certainly worth at this stage proceeding as recommended. It's not committing the council to anything financially. It's more just saying this is a project which really does have some potential, and what scope it fits between $0 worth of investment versus the 120. That's something we need to look out for, because there are those parts like the camping areas which certainly do generate an income and revenue for the park. So they might be areas where we could look at a bit faster than other areas, but. I think overall it is a great project, and just something I'd also like to share just with the Possum Finishing School and Fauna. They've got a very, very strong advocate in Susie Strapp in trying to get funding and progress towards helping them realise the ultimate goal of a native animal hospital. And just last Friday we were in Bustleton, the city of Bustleton, for a luncheon with the Governor General, of which Susie was in attendance. And she certainly wasn't above bailing up the Governor-General to discuss those native wildlife needs. So that just shows you sort of the nature of who she is and what she believes in, and just how dedicated some of the volunteers are to these sorts of projects. I think it's fantastic to see that there's people wanting to see this sort of development in the Shire. So I think, the officer's recommendation, I think we should certainly have a look and see where it goes, and then we'll come with refining it down to a well-defined and understood project. We'll see exactly what those figures look like, what's actually going to be feasible to build in that area, and then what the makeup of funding would look like, whether the Shire actually puts anything in, or whether it's all private enterprise and entrepreneurs, or whether the state and federal government want to do something in this area. So with that, I'll commend that to the council, and with everyone now spoken, I'll return the call to the mover, Councillor Mogg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I reserve my right to speak. You did a fantastic job. Thank you.
And with that, I'll put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimous. 13.4, the proposed ordinary council meeting dates for 2024. Is there a mover? Councillor Mogg. A seconder? Councillor Dillon. Councillor Mogg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I read the motion as read and ask council for support vote. Thank you.
Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. President. A few words from me. Look, I'm very much for the motion as presented. I think it goes back, in my humble opinion, to a more sensible framework for our OCMs, or ordinary council meetings, next year. Dropping December meeting, I think, is important, and I want to mention this, and this is why I was sort of against the way things went last year. I think it's important that our staff can take some time off and have some certainty about what's happening when. And I think it's important that we recognise that this is one of the things that we as a local government have to do to retain our good staff. If they're working, if there's a council meeting every month, including December, it just takes away that flexibility that sometimes our good staff need in terms of our retaining them, and in some cases attracting them to work within our organisation. So I don't think there's anything we can't deal with in November or January with a bit of good management from our executive staff. Thank you.
Are there any speakers for, pardon me, is there any speakers for or against that item? No. Councillor Mogg, wish to close?
Thank you, Mr. President. I reserve as said.
I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimous. Now move to infrastructure and development reports. 14.1, environmental offsets register update to council. Is there a mover for that recommendation? Councillor Mogg. Is there a seconder? Councillor McCleary. Councillor Mogg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm very pleased to see this motion come to council. Not long after being admitted on council on the climate change, adaptability, sustainability, I put in a motion after finding we didn't have any offsets in our Shire to find some. So I'm so pleased to see that this motion's come to council and that action is going to happen on this, and ask council support. Thank you.
Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, President. Yeah, look, most of the offsets are sitting with the DWER and the proponent, so it's controlled in that. Hopefully we can get a bit of guidance in getting some identity of offsets in the Shire of Capel, and that's what this bit of investigation was. At this stage, it not incurring any cost for us, it's more identifying issues.
Are there any speakers against that recommendation? Speakers for? No discussion? Councillor Mogg, do you wish to close?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd just like to see that our Shire eventually will be able to invest in our future sustainability with offsets. I think our residents deserve that. Thank you.
And I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried. Unanimous. 14.2, Extractive Industry Development Proposal, lots 677 and 679, Callinup Road, Jalorup. Is there a mover for that recommendation? Councillor McCleary. Is there a seconder? Councillor Dillon. Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, a number of us went to site yesterday and had a look at the current rehabilitations. I think the officers have covered most of the bases on there. Extractive industries are a very important part of the Shire, and this particular site's been an extension of time, and we've updated our rehabilitation plans. Our executive officers are right over all that, so I can see that we're managing that better than in the past, and I have confidence that we'll manage the outcomes that we're after for the rehabilitation, which is the one thing that we find important of this. A lot of this sand, in talking to the operator, will finish up in other shires, and it's probably in a lot of concrete structures that'll be going down in Bustleton by the sounds of it. So yeah, look, we're providing a very important resource to those areas for the rest of the state. So yeah, look, I recommend this motion.
Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think and thanks to the operator for allowing us to come and have a look around the site yesterday. As Councillor McCleary pointed out, it's very important that we get a first-hand look at, I suppose, what's happening with our extractive industries. You know, we know that there can be contentious within the community, but we know that a lot of the operators are providing a very important resource that is progressively getting more and more scarce. I think it was good to see how rehabilitation was happening on the 1 and 6 Batter Slope yesterday. I went for a bit of a walk up the hill myself, and there was some things I'd probably like to see looked at down the track, but I understand the operators, you know, having a go. It pays to point out that the Batter Slope on the southern boundary of this continuing extraction will be going to a 1 in 4, which, while might be make a few of us a bit nervous, I think it's important that we do, where we have allowed clearing, we do need to maximise a resource coming out of the ground. And I think with us adjusting our extractive industry bonds a little earlier in the piece, I think, you know, we just need to cross our fingers and hope for the best and make sure our monitoring is spot on as we move forward. But I do acknowledge 1 in 4 is not necessarily seen as industry standard, but I think in order for us to get the most out of our natural resources, it is the way to go, and I'm happy to recommend the motion as presented.
Are there any speakers against the motion? Speakers for? Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, councillors have already spoken. I'd like to just make the observation that the native vegetation at the top of the ridge has, for over 100 years, been grazed by cattle. The the ridge has been logged. You know, all of the big trees, there were big jarrah trees and big tuart trees right over the ridge. There are very few of them now in any good condition, and there are weeds and invasive plants throughout it. So my point is that the native vegetation that we're looking at the top of the ridge is not in pristine condition. And my view is that we're actually, by extracting the resource, that it gives us the opportunity to start again and to rehabilitate the mine site properly and to do it well. And to that point, to do it well and to do it once. So my biggest fear is that we'll approve this. It'll go ahead. The proponent will go ahead, take out what they're allowed to take out, to the batter slopes they're allowed to take out. Then they'll rehabilitate it, and then the mine's probably got another maybe 10 or 20 years of life in it. Then in 30 or in 40 years' time, or in 50 years' time, future councils will be sitting where we are now and saying, well, and be told by state governments that, okay, we've run out of sand everywhere else, we're going to have to start mining the sand that's underneath the road reserve which runs down the centre line of the ridge. Because there's, potentially hundreds of years of additional sand underneath that road reserve. If this pit was able to clear all the way through to the pit on the other side of the ridge, which has already got its extraction licence, so that rather than having a ridge line with all of these little pockets of sand mines grabbed out from either side, and the bulk of the sand still sitting under poor native vegetation, surrounded by pockets of good vegetation only to be later cleared again, I sort of think my view is that we should encourage the state government to look at doing things like moving the road reserve that's up there, moving the telephone towers that are up there, and enabling a full extraction of the resource that is available, and doing it well, doing it once and doing it well. We recently had the 40th anniversary of the America's Cup win, and Alan Bond was both the hero and the villain, in his entrepreneurial life in Western Australia. Certainly America's Cup was a great victory for him. The other great thing that Alan Bond did, and that's not often sort of remembered, is that he was actually the prime instigator in combining the leases up at Kalgoorlie to create the Kalgoorlie Super Pit. And it was exactly the same scenario. By combining these leases, they were able to follow seams of gold that went underneath property boundaries.
Councillor, I'll just ask you to come back a bit more to the subject. Okay. I think we should encourage the state government to extract the resource completely and to do it well, and to do the rehabilitation really well once. So I'm going to support the motion. All right, are there any speakers? Councillor Tarantroy?
I just wanted to make it clear that under the conditions of the recommendations from the officers, this decision only is valid for a period of 8 years from the date of approval, and Further, the resource extraction is only permitted for a maximum of 5 years after the issue of this development approval. And there's a whole heap of this, all these new recommendations for rehabilitation and putting limits on extractive industries all came into play since I've been on council, which is a wonderful thing. And so this is a good thing. So, I mean, even like no storage of hydrocarbons on site, you know, they're not allowed to do that. And we're going to have, hopefully in the near future, someone on council who will be able to police all this. So that will be good. So yeah, and it covers everything. And it's the rehabilitation plan as well. So the rehabilitation plan is good, yes. 1 in 4 not so good, 1 in 6 better is better. But we've had to give a little bit. All the officers have had to give a little bit as well. So yes, I agree with Councillor Noonan about extracting this valuable resource because it is a commodity at the moment that is very scarce. And yes, why not take it from an area that's already being mined at the moment? As long as we're not hitting the water table and all of that, and everything else is going to be fine. So yeah, and anyway, they've got to notify as soon as they hit the water table if they do. Within a period, otherwise they're in breach. So yeah, this is a good move. But yes, 8 years, but only 5 years in extraction at this stage. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers to that item? No. Councillor McCleary, do you wish to close?
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, look, this is a planning decision. The planning officers has gone through it and given us all the advice, and they've been very thorough in their attitude in all the points that they've raised. They are in compliance. So I think we need to approve this motion.
I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? That's carried 6-1. Item 14.3, request for tender 2309, Engineering Technical Services Design Support Evaluation Report. Is there a mover for that recommendation? Councillor McCleary. Is there a seconder? Councillor Sciano. Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is one of those actions where we get a bit nimble with our designs as such. It helps us get through decision making on a lot of our design work, and I commend the officers for bringing this to council.
The Deputy President. No. Are there any speakers for or against this item? No. Councillor McCleary, do you wish to close? I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried. Unanimous. Item 14.4, temporary road closure, Sleaford Drive. Is there a mover for that recommendation? Councillor Noonan. Is there a seconder? Councillor Dillon. Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a request which we've had from the South West Gateway Alliance to enable them to do some more work in order for the bore to proceed. Yeah, so it's simply about a temporary road closure, now that the bore is, definitely happening, it's that debate, that battle has been fought and either won or fought and lost, depending on your point of view. I think it's important that the work be able to proceed in as timely a manner as possible, because that then limits the amount of interruption that the residents in that area are going to face. I would, however, make the point back to Southwest Gateway Alliance that the Shire has been, in my view, I think the council, the Shire and the council have been forthcoming and very cooperative in the assistance that the Shire has given, and so I'm a little bit disappointed that when we have made requests back the other way to the Southwest Gateway Alliance that certain things happen. So, for example, the preserving or some of the important trees and timber, that they have given us some, but a dozen fairly short and twisted sections of woody pear really don't represent the 140 large trees that were there. So it's I think it's been a very big learning experience for main roads. I think they've changed a lot of the policies and the procedures that they follow. They've learnt a lot in this process, and I'm hoping that they will continue to learn and become and be more responsive to community concerns in the future. However, to minimise the impact on local residents, I think that we should pass this motion.
Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. President. I believe this closure would be effective October this year through May next year. I'm of the belief that it was brought forward a little quicker than anticipated by Southwest Gateway. There were no public submissions on the item from my reading, and plenty of notice. Like Councillor Noonan said, the ball is moving ahead, and we need to help facilitate that as required.
Are there any speakers for or against the motion? Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Councillor Dillon and Councillor Noonan. This is going to be an important entrance into Jalora, seeing the changes that meant that Hasty Road was no longer the connection through to Dalyella. This will be a bit of a major intersection for people moving in and out of Jalora, and probably give them a quicker journey into Perth, which is going to be great. As to the clearing of vegetation, I think the Southern Gateway Alliance needed to abide by regulators and what they could remove and hand on to us. So that was my understanding from that. But yeah, look, I fully endorse this. I think this will be the main entry into Jalora going forward for people travelling from Perth and probably visiting friends and in the area.
Are there any other speakers to that item? Councillor Mogg.
Question through the chair.
Yes.
Will the residents, in effect, be notified by Shire a letter of works?
The Director of Infrastructure and Development.
Thanks for the question. The residents have already been notified, so there was a consultation as part of this report before it came to council. We didn't receive any submissions in regards to this item, so yes, that has occurred.
Are there any other speakers to that item? Councillor Tarantroy.
Look, I'd just like to thank the Shire officers for their diligence with this and with the community consultation. I know that this has been a very hot topic for a lot of residents of Jalora, and upsetting for a number of families and other residents in the area that not directly affected but affected. But I also want to say that this is a good thing. Community consultation has happened, and even we just found out tonight that the consultation's already happened. So the people who are affected by this road closure have already been contacted by the Shire, so they know. And so yes, that was my actual question too. So thank you for asking that, Rosina. I think that hopefully, because it's ahead of time, ahead of schedule, that this period between October 2023 and May 2024, because things seem to be moving along quite quickly, it might even be for a shorter period. Who knows? Yeah, but I commend the officers and the staff for going out there and talking with the residents affected. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers to that item? Right. Councillor Noonan, do you wish to close?
Thank you, Mr. President, and yeah, I'd like to thank the councillors who've spoken. I'd like to perhaps pick up on a good point made by Councillor McCleary, that this will become the new, or the main entrance, if you like, the first entrance into Jalora for most travellers coming from Perth, and that they will go past, going down Jules Road, they'll go past the park on the corner of Sleaford Avenue that Don Punch, the Honourable Don Punch MLA, made an election commitment to upgrade the park facilities there. So I'm looking forward to that, that final park being completed, because I'm sure it will be, done very, very well and to a high standard, and the people of North Jalora in particular are looking forward to that. But it also provides the opportunity for SWEC, to South West Gateway Alliance, to perhaps consider making some contribution to an entrance statement for Jalora. Jalora's the only major locality in the Shire which doesn't have a significant entrance statement, akin to the ones at Boynup or at Capel, even Pippi Beach and Dalyella. So that might be something that the South West Gateway Alliance and Main Roads may wish to consider in terms of ameliorating some of the sentiment that was generated by the positioning of the bore. Thank you.
All right, I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? And those against? And that's carried 6-1. Move to item 14.5, proposed extractive industry sand, lot 141307 Kenbell Road, North Boynup. Is there a mover for that recommendation? Councillor Dillon. Is there a seconder? Councillor Tarantroy. Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Can I please move that motion with an amendment?
Yes.
I would like to remove all reference to cartage on Fowler Road being allowed removed from the motion.
I'll just wait for that on the board. Move. Fowler Road. It's not significantly different. It does. Yeah. you like, Talia? Yep. Does the seconder still happy to second that? Yep. Just before I offer you the call, Councillor Dillon, just checking on a point whether the motion's actually valid, because the mention of Fowler Road's contained within the application. It's not actually in the officer's recommendation about it being a haulage route. It's within the report, and essentially in doing so, if the amended recommendation to pass, it would only remove Fowler Road from condition J, which would mean that it would still be a haulage route, and could do 110. And you? And the grading, that's right, yeah. And they wouldn't have to grade it. The motion moved with an amendment would still be valid, but they're the likely consequences of it.
Can you just reiterate those consequences, please, Mr. President?
So in the conditions before us tonight, Fowler Road is only mentioned in conditions J and U. J would mean that the agreed speed limit of 60 kilometres an hour wouldn't be in effect, meaning that it would still be a haulage route where the truck could do 110 kilometres an hour. And condition U is regarding the grading of certain sections along Skippings, Brookdale and Fowler Road, so they would be removed from that obligation, so they wouldn't have to grade Fowler Road. Question, yeah?
You understand the intention of my amendment?
I think I understand the intention of your amendment.
Yes.
And I think so does the director and the CEO. So, all right, what I might do is just adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes to allow staff to prepare a proper amendment, if that's all right, Councillor? Yep, all right, so I'll adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes. At 7:34, we'll reconvene at 7:39.
understand extractive industries need to happen, and I'm not trying to cramp the proponent's style to any great degree. This is pretty much based on local knowledge and some good conversations with some of the locals in the area. Look, I'll say right off the top, you know, the proponent's end of Skippings Road is precious little more than a mud track, but if he's happy to bring a truck down it, not a problem. He's spent money from the previous extractions on Brookdale Road and tried to help upgrade the road. I would probably agree with some of our residents' earlier comments that it's probably one of the better gravel roads in the Shire at this point in time. However, the reason I wanted to remove Fowler Road from this particular extractive licence is it's just not up to it. In particular, my biggest concern is the S-bend about halfway down. The thought of a truck going through that little S-bend with a local on the road makes me shudder. It is quite low-lying in certain areas at certain times of the year and is prone to some flooding. And I just don't think it has the width, and with the camber of the road, if there's a truck on there, not giving enough room to some of our local residents and ratepayers, I think it could be a bit ugly. I just think the proponent can definitely perform his duties and his extraction, utilise Brookdale Road, which is a great road. It might mean a few more Ks on the clock for it to get where it's supposed to go, but I think ultimately Fowler Road is not a viable option for trucks moving regularly, and I really encourage my fellow councillors to look at my amendment very deeply. Thank you.
Councillor Terran-Troy.
Look, I totally agree with Councillor Dillon. 60 kilometres, I wouldn't drive 60 kilometres an hour down Fowler Road in a full drive, which I've done, but not at 60 kilometres an hour, because of that, because of the canter of the road, as Ashley Dillon said, but also because of that S-bend. And I've driven it also in my Mini, and I know I went really slow, because you slide all over that road, and even, you know, going slower. I couldn't imagine a truck going 60 kilometres an hour down Fowler and coming afoul and then taking out a local resident who didn't see them. Yeah, so I'm all for this amendment, and this was the big thing that I saw when I first read this. So when I'm so grateful for Councillor Dillon for moving this amendment. Thank you.
Are there any speakers against the motion? Speakers for? Any discussion? The Deputy President.
Thank you. Before I take my opportunity to speak, I do wish to propose an amendment to Clause J. If I could get the amended or the other version, which has been moved up on the screen, just so I can read it back to minute taker. And so it would be that the applicant to ensure that trucks do not exceed 40 kilometres an hour along Brookdale Road and Skippings Road at any time, and leaving no haulage is permitted to occur on Fowler Road.
All right, we'll just get the amendment on the board. That's your amendment, Councillor?
Sorry, it's just a couple of little bits to pull out there. At any time, and just continuing on to Brookdale Road and Skippings Road at any time. So remove at any time think you can take out a long as well. And so it will read, the applicant to ensure trucks do not exceed 40 kilometres an hour along Brookdale Road and Skippings Road at any time. No haulage is permitted to occur at Fowler Road.
That's your amendment, councillor?
Yep.
Can I just ask for a bit of quiet in the public chamber, please? If I can hear you talking. Order. All right, is there a seconder to that? Councillor Noonan. The Deputy President.
I don't think I need to explain the particular amendment in much detail. It does ultimately provide continuity. I think we've heard from the community tonight and throughout the week around the request for the 40 kilometre an hour limit. I don't think that's unreasonable. I think we've heard as well of current arrangements that are in place with people who use that or businesses who are using or accessing through Brookdale Road. But ultimately as well, I think is very strongly applied to Fowler Road, which I think with the other amendment has obviously resolved that issue as well. But I commend the amendment.
Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, I agree entirely with Councillor Ciano, and I thank him for bringing this amendment.
Are there any speakers against the amendment? Speakers for? Any discussion? Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. Firstly, I've got a question, and it probably relates to Fowler Road, in that if we've got an issue with this S-bend, do we plan to do anything with that going forward to take it out for general public safety?
There's nothing regarding the S-bend on Fowler Road in the forward planning that I'm aware of. The Director of Infrastructure's tracking ahead, so yeah.
Right, perhaps that's something we need to look at going forward if that's going to be an issue around that area. My next sort of concerns with all this is it was my understanding that the sand was going to be carted south, which meant going on to Boynup West Road would mean that the trucks wouldn't enter into Boynup. But a general off-cuff discussion with the operator was saying that he was talking about it's going to be pretty random when a truck goes in there. He might do it as a backfill job to cart soil back to his depot, which I think is closer to Bunbury. Is that right? Don't know. Yeah. So I'm just wondering whether we're changing the route. I'm okay with the amendments and where it's going forward, but I think there's some potential operator issues, but the number of trucks that are involved is pretty minimal. It's 6 a day in and out, which is max, so it's minimum, and it's keeping within the 75 vehicles per day limit that was set, and it meets the criteria.
Are there any other speakers to that amendment? Councillor Mogg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make amendment to this current amendment.
Sorry, you can't do that, Councillor.
Can't do that.
No, you have to wait till
I'll
these
come
amendments. Yep. Are there any further discussion on that amendment? Councillor Tarantroy.
I'd just like to thank Councillor Shishano for picking up on what I said about I wouldn't drive down Fowler at 60 kilometres an hour in a four-wheel drive or a Mini. Thank you.
Is there anything further on that amendment? Does the mover wish to close? Or
Sorry, question through the chair.
question, Councillor, yes?
Going back to Councillor Dillon's amendment, that didn't get approved or passed before moving on to...
It was moved with amendment, so it was moved as the primary motion.
Okay, thank you for clarification.
All right, if there's no further speakers, the Deputy President, do you wish to close? I'll put that amendment to the vote. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimous. That becomes part of the substantive motion, and I'll return the call to the Deputy President.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I do still wish to speak on the substantive motion and appreciate Councillor Dillon moving this with the amendment in regards to Fowler Road. And I guess Fowler Road was something that was a key consideration originally as well for me in regard to the 40 kilometre limit across all three. But I still think that's applicable in the situation that we have now in regards to Brookdale and Skippings. I do actually share somewhat of the similar sentiment to Councillor McCleary in the fact that Fowler did provide probably a more effective route to the south without having to see vehicles or trucks having to go through the main street of Boynup. But I think that is the lesser of the issues in regards to the condition of that S-bend and that road. So I think that, very supportive of the motion as it's been amended. And I mean, the rest of the application is consistent. I mean, we're talking about trucks now, but we talked about batter slopes recently, and I mean, the batter slopes in this are consistent, which is great to see. But it is a consistent application. I'm glad that, and I understand that the applicant did negotiate that 60-kilometre speed limit with the administration, and I do hope that the applicant can understand the council's or my view, as it's not council's decision yet, but around the need to reduce the speed along that road. We've heard it before, but the condition of the road is probably the best it's been in for a while. I still remember the very first call I took as a councillor in 2015 was about Brookdale Road. Nothing has changed 8 years on. Might even be the first call I take after the election. I don't know. Maybe I'll still be drawn out to Brookdale Road even if I'm not here. But the condition of that road does deteriorate quite significantly. It is probably one of the busier feeder unsealed roads in the community, and there is obviously quite a number of there is a few residential a dozen residential properties down that road as well. The truck movements, though, it is quite a small number of truck movements. Only 12, 6 in, 6 out, and I think making that comment as well in regards to them having to come through Boynup potentially to go down to service customers in the south. I mean, the comment still applies. It is quite a small number of trucks. So yeah, I'm supportive of the alternative recommendation that's been moved and appreciative of the amendment that's been made and supported by council. So commend the motion.
Are there any other speakers on that item? Councillor Mogg.
Thank you, President. I'd like to make an amendment to the motion.
Yep, your amendment, Councillor.
I don't think it's fair just for the applicant to... Pardon?
Your amendment, Councillor.
Thank you. Fair to the applicant to be restricted to 40 kilometres. I would like to see an overall blanket for all trucks using Fowler, Skippings and Brookdale do 40 kilometres per hour. So can we make amendment?
Yeah, I know, but I don't know if I can...
Point of order.
Point of order, Councillor?
Yeah, I don't think this is addressing the motion on the table.
That's...
It's actually applying to residents, and this is actually about a extractive industry.
Yeah. Councillor Mogg, under clause 9.92 standing orders, I don't believe that motion amendment is entirely relevant to the primary motion.
Okay.
And we don't have the ability to apply speed limits, so it would be inoperable from the Shire's perspective.
Okay.
Yep.
I accept that. Thank you.
Do you still wish to speak to the item? No? Are there any other speakers to the motion? No? If not, I'll take the opportunity to speak. Look, I think there's been certainly a bit of discussion around there. I think what we've certainly understood tonight is there's an appreciation for our road network around the table, and certainly in the public gallery. Look, I think we can have certainly pass this tonight and and Shire officers can certainly have that discussion with the proponent around those speed limits, and we'll see where it ends from that. I think council's made, through the discussions, its intent pretty clear around preservation of those roads and the amenity for the residents in the area. And you know, I think there's certainly an appetite to go a step further with what was just discussed then and proposed an amendment from Councillor Mogg. And you know, I think what we need to do is, while it can't be a discussion as part of this recommendation and this item before us, because it's different to what we're actually deciding. Plus, we don't have the power to impose those speed limits. It's a discussion council's had with main roads in the past regarding speed limits, and that's when the 70k limits got brought into Jalorup and the Stratham areas to help reduce road vehicle noise and make that area safer for cyclists and families that are in that area. So I think it's worth a discussion going forward that we could probably have with main roads about perhaps trucks in general should just be limited to perhaps probably 60 along those roads, because there is a variety of trucks. They're not all heavy haulage. You know, there's a variety of cattle trucks and horse floats and those sorts of things. So I think certainly having a look about perhaps, you know, road vehicles, you can go as fast as the speed limit allows, but perhaps heavy vehicles, yeah, probably we could look at reducing them to 60. So I think that's for a discussion separate to this item tonight. But I think I certainly understand Councillor Mogg's intent there, and I think it's something to look at in the future, for sure. But as part of the recommendation tonight, I think we need to just keep it focused on the item. I think that intent's come through from the council regarding the 40k and the preservation of the roads. So I think we can put this through and see what happens. I do have some concerns regarding, though, whether it's a defendable position. But we'll see what happens. So, all right. Are there any other speakers to the item?
Question?
Councillor Mogg, question, yes?
Through the chair to you. Can I have clarification, please, why an applicant is approved 40 kilometres for trucks and not elsewhere? If we're saying that it's a main roads decision, or council or Shire can't lower speed limit, but yet for an applicant we can lower this truck limit to 40. Can I just have clarification how that is so?
So speed limits in general are set by main roads with advice from WA Police. The only reason council can have a look at this as a condition is because it's a negotiated factor between the proponent and Shire officers, and that's a discussion that's come out with the original recommendation, Jay, which was 60 and 40 on Skippings Road. So that's where it's come. In terms of a blanket ban on all truck movements, well, that would be impacting other extractive industry licences or other enterprises which aren't necessarily part of the Shire of Capel, which we don't have the authority to do. So that's where that discussion through main roads would come in. But in terms of putting it as a condition on an extractive industry to try and cover other operators, regardless of whether an IL or other private enterprise, it's not something that we would have the ability to put in this motion, Councillor. Yeah. All right, is there any further discussion on that item? Councillor Dillon, do you wish to close?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just briefly, I will just state for the record that my main concern in bringing my amendment to the table was because of Fowler. I understand that our Shire officers negotiated the speed limit provisions in this motion, and I was happy to leave them as presented, mainly because I don't want to see this contested further afield either. I will reluctantly go along with the modification to those speed limits in the motion, but I think ultimately it's a good outcome for our residents in the area, and I sincerely hope it's a workable end game for the proponent. Thank you.
apologies, my microphone was off. That motion was carried 6-1. We now move to item 14.6, final approval structure plan amendment 2 to the Dalyellup South Local Structure Plan, Lot 1, Harewards Road, Dalyellup. Is there a mover? Councillor Tarantroy. A seconder? Councillor McCleary. Councillor Tarantroy.
Moved as read. I just want to say that, I remember when this first came to council and I let everyone know that the structure plan was out there, put it all over Facebook so people could go and check it out at the libraries, so they knew that this was coming. And I think that the changes are good. I know that some people in the community have reservations about a Catholic educational facility. However, I think there's a acceptance of diversity, acceptance of culture goes every direction, not just the direction that suits you. So that's what I say to people not happy about it. Because, yeah, culture comes in all shapes and sizes, and if we're going to accept culture, we accept all culture. Yeah, and freedom of belief. So this is basically a planning thing, and yeah, and there's been an amendment of the lot sizes and the number of lots and all of that sort of thing. So it's estimated dwellings are reduced in size, but more. So it is going to be smaller lots. The estimated population, based on a three persons in a household, is between 396 to 228. Now this is a future development, so this is, yeah, just at the planning stages at the moment. So, and we know that when these developments come to get back to council again, they get changed. Yeah, so. Yeah, so we're just adopting this schedule of submissions, and I thank everyone who, the residents who did put in submissions, because that's important, because that's part of the process. It's what makes things transparent, and I think the officers have done a good job of tabling all this information for everyone to read within the agenda. Yeah, I put this forward for all my councillors to vote on and discuss.
Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. And yeah, look, these are a bit of a change in the layout there. I'd kind of like to see some more layout changes, moving more reserve close to the public open space more closer to the reserve to give a bit of a buffer. But it is what it is, and I don't see any issues with approving this.
Are there any speakers against the motion? Speakers for? Any discussion? No. Councillor Tarantroy, you wish to close? I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimous. Being just a little bit after 8 o'clock, I'll adjourn the meeting for 10 minutes to allow for refresh. We'll meet back at 8:14. water? Do you want some water? You right? All right, we've got nearly everyone back. Where's Seb? You need to hurry up. All right, it being 8:14, I'll reconvene the meeting. Are you back on? That's good. All right, item 14.7, tourism facility restaurant with capacity for 300 patrons, micro market and processing facility, lot 584, number 313 Goodwood Road, Capel. Is there a mover for that? Councillor McCleary. Is there a seconder? Councillor Mogg. Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think this one's pretty straightforward. It's a great enterprise to be having in our community. It's been working as Marron Farm for a while, and it'll be a nice venue to visit when it's finally completed.
Councillor Mogg.
Thank you, President. I reserve my right to speak and support Councillor McCleary's speech.
Are there any speakers for or against that item? Councillor Tarantroy.
I just wanted to say that I'm really appreciative of the Shire staff officers again for working out the structure that wasn't approved, didn't have a current building permit, so they worked it all out and everything's good. Yeah, so the Marron Farm looks like a great place. The restaurant, like the plan for the restaurant and for all of those ponds, it's going to be wonderful, a wonderful place for people, visitors and for locals to go. So yeah, the view from the platform of where the restaurant is on the second level there, up the ramp, it's great. You can see all around. You look out one way, you see cows. You look out the other way, you see all the ponds for the Marron. So yeah, it's a really great agribusiness and aqua, yeah, based on water. But yes, I think it's fantastic, and yeah, I'm just quite in awe of the scope of the business and the planning that's gone ahead with it. They know what they're doing, so yeah, it's fantastic. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers to that item? Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, I'm all for this motion as presented. I was somewhat surprised about what I would have felt were slightly limited hours of operation, but if that's what they want, fantastic. It certainly is a world-class facility, bringing in revenue to the area and creating jobs, and a great way to showcase our beautiful black crabs to people from all over the place. So just one note, apparently some parking shortfalls can certainly be addressed. So it's been well thought through by the proponent and staff, so I'm all for it.
Are there any other speakers to the item? No. Councillor McCleary, wish to close?
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, as pointed out by the planning staff, this is a compliant application.
I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimous. Item 14.8, request for tender 23-10, traffic management, provision of goods and services. Is there a mover for that recommendation? Councillor McCleary. A seconder. Councillor Tarantroy. Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll move the motion as read. It's another one of those nimble things that we need to get to make sure we can do the work that we need to do.
Councillor Tarantroy.
I trust the process. The process is quite rigorous, the tender process, and the team of staff that sit on the panel and do all this work. It's very transparent. So, yeah, I thank the staff for all their hard work and diligence. Thank you.
Are there any speakers for or against that item? No discussion. Councillor McCleary, you wish to close? I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimous. Community and Corporate Reports. 15.1, the 2024 to 2034 Long-Term Financial Plan and 2023-24 Advocacy Prospectus. Is there a mover for that recommendation? Councillor Sciano. Is there a seconder? Councillor Mogg. The Deputy President.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Well, at the end of the day, the LTFP is the document you go to when you want to see what a Shire has for a vision. And the LTFP that we have in front of us, I think, has come a long way from some of the variations that I probably would have seen in my first years on council. And of course, we've got the advocacy perspective to go along with that as well. I think a couple of standout things, and council have had the opportunity to have some quite in-depth workshops with the administration over the LTFP. I think identifying and being more transparent with reserves is greatly beneficial, and obviously the advocacy prospectus, which I mean, it makes sense to have that here in the same recommendation, because ultimately the two go hand in hand. We're identifying these projects that have come, and I mean, it's kind of, I want to say this council meeting is actually kind of like a bit of a journey through our forming documents, because and I know the place plan didn't come up tonight, but council's, you know, read through the place plan and done all these things, but we've had this place plan, we've done the consultation, we've endorsed our SCP tonight, and we've seen how all those strategies come together, and then we see how those strategies work with the corporate business plan, and then we get down from that and we start to trickle down into this long-term financial plan. And I mean, it's just a bit of a journey we go on with this council meeting, I think, and we've arrived at the long-term financial plan. And I think a lot of the things that are in there are probably not a huge surprise. I think there's some projects in there that, the surf club's been in that LTFP for as long as I've been around, and as long as Peter's been around both times, and it's still there. But identifying, of course, the funding models for those as well over the years, and like I say, that I think that works straight into the advocacy prospectus, because we always realise, and I talked about this with the Kajinja Biodiversity Park, which is in that advocacy priority list, we can't fund these things alone. There's some identification in there around the different funding models. I think the idea of some borrowings, particularly on capital works that are for the benefit, the efficiency of the organisation, they're not the sexy things, so they are a bit harder to achieve the state government support, the funding, the grant funding. And they probably, I think that the approach or principle that we've had to borrowing, I think, is good. I think what the director has proposed to us is good. But yeah, no, very supportive. This is such an important document. It's one of the forming documents of everything we do. So happy to commend it to council.
Councillor Mogg.
Thank you, President. I'd just like to support what Councillor Sciano's just said. Thank you.
Are there any speakers against the item? Speakers for? Councillor Terrantroy.
I feel like I've got a lot to say tonight, but it's good to see the second advocacy prospectus come to council, because this is our second one. This was a new way of the new leadership within the staff at the Shire. So it's a really professional way to work. I think it's great. And I agree with everything that Councillor Sciano said. It's about community, it's about what we can see, and yeah, not everything that we do and we read is sexy. Some of it's just really long reads. But it's well worth all the planning and having it all fit together, and to see everything come to fruition. And then when it doesn't quite get there, like the place plan, it goes back and then comes back when it's ready to come back, because there's some issues with it. But yeah, I think it's a very professional way to go. I think it's the long-term plan, and yeah, I'm especially proud of the work that the staff have done with the advocacy prospectus, because it's our second one. So yes, thank you.
Are there any other speakers to that item? The Deputy President wish to close? No, I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried unanimous. (15.2) Community Events Sponsorship Scheme, Round 1. Moved, Councillor Mogg. Seconded, Councillor McCleary. Councillor Mogg.
Thank you, President. I'd like to move the motion as read, and I highly support community groups, and I thank those who have applied, and congratulations. Thanks to the staff, the work done. Thank you.
Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. I concur with Councillor Mogg's statements on this item.
Are there any speakers for or against that item? Councillor Terran-Troy.
Just really quickly, our volunteers in our community do so much for our community, and they really are the backbone and the ones that organise and are involved in events. With all of the protocols and the event management that has to happen with these events, I think it's amazing that we have such a wonderfully strong volunteer population within the Shire of Capel. We are very fortunate. I mean, I've volunteered in every community I've worked in, lived in, and it's just wonderful to see. It's the same type of people that do all of that, and they just achieve so much and make Capel a really great place to live. So thank you to all the volunteers.
Are there any other speakers to that item? Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, just very briefly, just to point out that there's basically 27,000 plus grand in cash and about $3.5 grand of in-kind help for our 8 winners of our various grants. There was a balance of nearly 2,800 left over. That'll be promoted in December this year, so if you weren't part of this round, maybe get into applying for that. But you know, such groups as Born Up Lions, Up Community Inc., Capel Cemetery Project, etc., all fantastic groups in our community and all worthy of this council's support.
Are there any other speakers to that item? Councillor Mogg, you wish to close? I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried unanimous. 15.3, the 2023-24 Minor Community Grant Scheme. Moved, Councillor Mogg. Is there a seconder? Councillor Sciano. Councillor Mogg.
Thank you, President. Again, I'd like to move the motion as read. Thank you for those who applied. Congratulations who've got funding, and thank you to the staff for work done into it. Thank you.
The Deputy President.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't think I need to go into too much detail. I think everyone in the previous item has just mentioned how important these community groups are and what a great job they do. So, very happy to commend the item to council.
Are there any other speakers to that item, for or against? Nope. Does the mover wish to close? Nope. I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimous. 15.4, the accounts paid during the month of August. Is there a mover for those accounts? Councillor McCleary. Is there a seconder? Councillor Dillon. Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the motion as read.
Councillor Dillon. Is there any discussion on those accounts? Nope. Anything further from the mover? I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimous. Item 15.5, the financial reports for the 31st of July 2023. Is there a mover for those statements? Councillor McCleary. Is there a seconder? Councillor Dillon. Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. Early in the year, it's really just a report from 30th of July. It's looking pretty good.
Councillor Dillon. Is there any discussion on those financial statements? Councillor Tarantroy.
This is a good trend, but the average investment rate returns is 4.4%, and it's above the July 2023 RBA cash rate of 4.1%, which I think is pretty good. So yeah, there's no change in the Reserve Bank's cash rate target of 4.1% as of the 5th of July 2023. So I think that this is good that our investments are giving us returns. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers on those financial statements? No. Councillor McCleary, do you wish to close? I'll put those to the vote. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimous. There's no new business of an urgent nature. We now move to public question time. Is there any questions from the gallery? Yep. Just like to approach the lectern and state your name and locality for the record.
Yeah, Nick Hornibrook. I'll put in the submission about the Marron Farm. I'm not against what they're doing, but I'm against their environmental credentials. That place has caused probably the worst bit of erosion that ever happened on the Capel River. They've cleaned out ponds there. I put in the submission, I don't know if all the councillors are aware of it. But
All councillors would have received the submissions. Yep.
well, you should be aware of what I'm saying then, probably. So it's not. But yeah, it's just they've dug out a lot of PVC pipe and I forget what it's called now. But anyway, there's a lot of plastic stuff there that's going to finish up in the river. Unless the council get onto them and make them do it, and before you give them any permission to do any further building, you should make them bring that site up to scratch environmentally.
Yep.
They've got one of two licences to draw water out of the river, and I don't know of anybody else along the river that does more harm, has done more harm to that river than what they have. Now, I don't know how whether you all went out and had a look, but you should have done. I'm not against it, it's just that they need to clean their act up. No, they rely on all the water in that river. Without that river board, I'm told, the Yarragadee, their marrow won't survive. So they absolutely rely on that river, and they should have a, there should be absolutely the best environmental standards on that place. And at the present time, it's not. They allow Scotch thistles to blow off their property onto my place, and they go onto the other next door neighbours. Next door neighbour fronted up to Scott one day and about the Scotch thistles, and he said, he didn't know what they were. So environmentally, it's a disaster. It's been a disaster since day one, and you need to get onto them.
Yep.
You shouldn't be allowed to get away with it.
Thanks, Mr. Hornibrook. I suppose with weed species, that's really the domain of the Department of Ag and Primary Industries, but we can certainly have a discussion with them about that. And regarding the pollution entering the river, I suppose we'll take that on notice and have a look into what's actually going on down there. But if you are aware or come across anything you think might not be compliant with the conditions of their development approval, similar to the extractive industries, please just report it to the Shire. Nothing further? Nope. All right. Is there any motions without notice? Nope. Is there any notice of motions for consideration at the next ordinary meeting of the Council? Nope. We now move to items for consideration behind closed doors. There is one item tonight. There is an officer's recommendation there that the meeting be closed to members of the public in accordance with the Shire of Capel Standing Orders Local Law 2016 12.1G to consider the confidential item. I will move that recommendation. Is there a seconder? Councillor McCleary. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimous. So the meeting's now closed to members of the public. I'll ask the gallery to leave. If you're leaving us this evening now, thank you very much for your attendance. Otherwise, you're more than welcome to hang around outside and join us once the meeting reopens. 3, Capel's Chief Executive Officer,